Hey folks, section 5, we in section 4 we talked about Jefferson's dilemma. He was facing the Barbary pirates and also um, the pressure of the British impressing U.S. sailors and kidnapping them and forcing them into service in the British Navy. So some background on this. Jefferson faced some interesting choices as we discussed at the end of section 4 regarding America's presence on the high seas. First one being Britain's impressment of the U.S. sailors, and the second, the increased demands, the more money that the Barbary pirates were requesting from the United States. Um, Jefferson did not want to send them any more money. He decided to send warships to protect merchants against the pirates. Congress passed a bill to enact an embargo to halt trade with foreign nations. So let's see how these choices turned out, and we'll deal with the pirates first. So we have the Pirate War. 1801, the warship escorts basically encouraged a plotting, slow-moving warfare with the pirates. This escalates or ramps up in 1804. The warships began bombing the city of Tripoli. During this bombardment, the American ship, the Philadelphia, ran aground. There was a hidden reef that the Americans didn't know about, and the ship ran aground. So here we see an image. It was an American Navy ship. The captain and the crew were captured and held for ransom, meaning the government officials in Tripoli wanted the United States to pay for their release. A young officer led a raiding party into the harbor, and he burned the ship. Stephen Decatur. Here we have a painting that depicts the events of that night. For his efforts, he was eventually promoted captain, the youngest man to be promoted to captain in the U.S. Navy at the age of 25. Countless attacks and several blockades forced Tripoli to give up their demands for the tribute, and the United States, for their part, then eventually paid $60,000 in ransom for the crew of the Philadelphia. And Jefferson was okay paying this. It was significantly less than the amount of money that the pirates were demanding in the form of tribute. So dealing with France and Britain then, Jefferson was working to convince both nations to leave American ships alone. He didn't want to enter into conflict with either of those two countries. All diplomatic efforts failed, though. Britain and France didn't want any part of any peace negotiations. And between 1803 and 1807, Great Britain is going to seize and capture over 1,000 ships. And during that same period of time, France captures half as many, or 500. Jefferson then proposes an embargo, which would be a complete halt in trade with foreign nations. So the Embargo Act of 1807, no American ships could go to foreign ports, and then no foreign ships could enter U.S. ports. So basically, he's blockading his own country, and this is going to have some drastic results or consequences. He thought this would persuade France and Great Britain to leave American ships alone. So the overall effects of the embargo, it hurt the U.S. more than it hurt the other countries. The shipping industry was greatly affected. There was over 55,000 sailors who lost their jobs. And in 1809, the act was repealed, with American ships returning to sea and British and French ships continuing their attacks. So we see that Jefferson tried to go through peace talks. Britain and France didn't want anything to do with that. Once the embargo was lifted, and Jefferson felt a lot of pressure from Congress and the American public that the embargo wasn't working. So they moved to lift the embargo. American ships are let back out to sea, and Britain and France just kind of go back to their old habits, seizing American ships and cargo, continuing the impressment practices. And all of this is going to lead into President Madison's presidency, which will eventually lead us into the War of 1812, which we'll talk about in sections 6 and 7.